Hi everybody, my name is Jake. I'm going to show you how to make a police light siren effect with sound. So I've got a room already made here, just ceiling, floor, and 4 walls, just to have something to have the light play off of. Um, and the only thing that I haven't added that we'll need before we start is a first person controller. It'll just move around the scene. So in our standard assets, character controller, first person controller, put it there. Up a little bit, stop it from falling through the floor. Okay, it works. So, and actually, just something that I like to do because uh, it's kind of annoying to have your cursor move around the screen while you're playing, is I'm just going to make a script here called mouse lock. And this will keep our mouse centered in the screen. So we don't need the start function. This is a really simple script, 2 lines. It's just going to say screen.lock cursor equals true. And then we're going to say screen.lock cursor equals false. And that just basically locks the cursor and centers it on the screen and then unlocks it each frame. So it keeps it effectively in the center. It's not a great script for a final product, but it's pretty good for testing. So here you can see that my cursor stays in the middle of the screen instead of moving all over the place. And I prefer that. So anyway, there's that. And so now we're actually going to go ahead and make our police car with sirens. So there'll be a few links in the notes, one for the model for the car that you can get from the asset store, one for a texture that I modified for the car to make it look more like a police car, one for the siren sound from freesound.org, and one for a material and shader pack also from the asset store. And that's what we'll be using for our glass. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the place where I have my assets, and I'm going to take my police car texture and bring it in, and I'm going to create a new folder to put this stuff in to keep everything nice and tidy. So we'll call it custom assets. Put my police car in there. I'll create another folder called textures. We'll drop police car in there. So I'll get my car that I downloaded from the store, move it just up off the ground, and I think I'm going to want it to face not that way, this way. I'll put it in the corner so we can see how it, the light affects walls and stuff at different ranges. And we'll go ahead and change the name of this to police car because I don't like the CC, whatever that said. And we'll open it up, and this is what we're going to want to apply our custom texture to, is the body. And so bam, we've got something that looks a little more like a police car. Nothing too fancy, but there you go. And we're going to add a siren here, and we're going to do this just by making 3 capsules. And so we'll rotate that and put it right about where we figure a siren would go on a police car, and that looks about where I would think it would go. We'll shrink it so that it's got the proper dimensions. So I don't have any 3D modeling ability or anything like that, which is why I do stuff like this in Unity. You know, sometimes you just can't find things for free on the asset store, and if you're kind of just a hobbyist or whatever, you don't have the funds to buy the things that you need, or you don't have the experience to make everything that you need, or the time, because there's a lot of work that goes into that kind of stuff, then you can just make a lot of things out of primitives in Unity. So I think that looks pretty good for a siren. Maybe we'll flatten it a little bit more. And we'll move it down. And so basically I'm just going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to shrink it. It's a duplicate, that is. Move it over here. I'm going to duplicate this one, move it over here. So now I've got 3 of these, and I'm actually going to shrink this one down just a little tiny bit more so we can differentiate it from those other ones. So we're going to take our materials that we downloaded in this hard surface shaders pack, and in our materials folder we have one called diamond, and I'm going to use that for this center portion. And then we've also got one ruby red for one side and blue for the other. So if you ask me, that looks pretty good without having to model anything or find it on the asset store. So that's pretty quick. So we'll go ahead and rename all of these things to keep our good naming convention. We have red siren, blue siren. We'll just call this one siren. And I'm going to nest both red and blue siren inside of siren, and nest siren inside of police car. So we've got our car set up, and that looks to me like a police car from that yellow sports car that we had. I think that's pretty good. Now we need some lights. So in each of these I'm going to add a component in rendering. It's going to be lights for each one, and they're both going to be spotlights. And you can see they're both pointing down, and that's not what we want. So I'm just going to go ahead and rotate these 90 degrees. So they're facing the rear of the police car, and that's fine for now. We're going to crank the range up on these. Actually, let's see. We'll go until they hit that firewall. First, actually, we'll crank the intensity up fairly high, 5.5, say, and our spot angle, make that quite a bit wider, and make sure that we can hit that firewall. So that looks pretty good. It's hitting all of our walls, I think, for range. Sure, that looks okay to me. So what I have that spot angle set to, something like that. Looks alright. Now that's pretty bright. We can mess with the intensity and stuff like that later if we want. But first, before we do that, we're going to go in and we're going to change the color on this light to be a red. And something like that. Same thing on this one, only blue. Alright. So we've got our lights set up. We'll just test the scene, make sure that everything's looking good. So yeah, everything's looking alright. That light looks kind of pink right now, but that shouldn't be a problem once we get our scripts going. So we're going to go ahead and on our siren create another script, and we'll call this SirenEffect. We'll open it up. The first thing we're going to do is get rid of our start function because we don't need that. Now we could be using a get component to assign these lights, but I'm just going to do it in the inspector for clarity, for everybody can do it and understand it. So the first thing we're going to need is a couple game objects, and we're going to serialize them, which for our purposes is basically just going to make them show up in the inspector so that we can assign to them. You could do this using public, but that is not something we really want to do because no other script is going to need access to these. So instead of just calling this a game object like we would for most things that we want like that, we're going to actually create these as lights because we only want objects that contain a light component to be accepted in the field in the inspector. So I'll demonstrate that in a second. So instead of using game object there, we'll use light, and we'll call this one redLight, and then we'll copy this and we'll do it again for blueLight. Now we're also going to need a couple temporary vector 3s in order to rotate our light, because Unity doesn't like it when you try to change an object's transform directly in C#. So we'll go ahead and make a couple of private vector 3s, and we'll call the first one redTemp, because it's going to be a temporary vector 3 to hold a rotation that we're going to use for our red light. And this is going to be the same thing, only for the blue light. And I think that's all we're going to need. Actually, we'll use an integer as well. And we'll serialize this one as well, so that we can see this in the inspector and modify this as we play the scene to pick a good speed. So we'll call this one, it's going to be an integer, and it's going to be our speed, and it's going to be how fast the lights rotate. So let's see. So each frame, we are going to want to set the y-axis of our red temp vector to increase by, we'll say, 300 degrees times time.deltaTime. And that just allows a smooth transition in case you have a variable frame rate, so that because update works each frame, multiplying something by time.deltaTime will make it so that it changes by a smooth increment, because time.deltaTime is the amount of time between frames. So even if you have variable frame rate, it's not going to affect the way that it looks when you play it. So we're going to do that for our redTemp.y and our blueTemp.y. I'll set that to 300 as well. Oops, blueTemp.y. And then we're also going to want to set our actual rotation of our lights. So we'll say redLight.transform.eulerAngles equals redTemp. We're going to say blueLight rather, .transform.eulerAngles equals blueTemp. Now, actually, while I'm doing this, I'm realizing that we have used an integer here instead of our speed variable, so we'll change that. And also, I planned on assigning this blue siren and the red siren as our light objects. But if I do that, what's going to happen is that whole thing is going to rotate, and that's not really what we want. So what I'm going to have to do is I'll just copy this component, and then I'll remove it. I'll do the same thing. I'll just remove this one, and I'm going to actually have to create a separate light object here. It's going to be a spotlight, and we'll paste our component values. We'll copy the component here, and we'll paste the component values here. And that's not working very well, is it? So I guess I didn't do what I want. I'll have to move it manually into our red light. Alright, that looks about centered to me. And we'll copy this, duplicate it rather, move it into our blue one. And that looks pretty good to me. And all we have to do is change that to blue. There we go. So we're back to where we were. Save our scene just for good measure. And now this script will be good to use. So we'll go back into Unity, and on our siren script, we've got our two things here, red light and blue light, and they're lights. And so, like I said, they're going to need something that has a light component on it. So if I try to say take this game object that is the ceiling and put it in there, it doesn't have a light component, so it won't take it. But if I take these spotlights, it will. But before I do that, I'm just going to change the name of these. Blue light, red light. I'm going to nest those in their respective siren thingies. So then back in siren, set our red light to that, and you can see because it has a light, it takes it just fine. And there we go. Now speed is currently set to 0, so when we try to run this, it will still not do anything, except it set it to that default value of our red and blue temp, which has a default rotation of 0, 0, 0, which is why it's facing a different direction now. So all we're going to have to do is just set our speed, and we'll change it to the 300 that we talked about earlier, and then we'll run this. And so now we've got our lights rotating, but they're both rotating together, and that's not what we want. So let's go back to our script, and we'll just put a minus here instead of a positive. So this is going to have it rotate in the opposite direction, which I think will give us the effect that we want. So there we go. That looks a lot better to me. But we could maybe crank up the speed a little bit more. So if we go over here, just click out of this, and we crank the speed up as we watch until we get to a level that we think looks good. I think something like that. So somewhere around 600, 650, I think looks good. So if you watch speed down here, when we click out, that'll reset back to 300 because any changes that you make while it's playing aren't kept. So we'll go ahead and we'll change this back to, say, 625. Happy medium, and we'll play it again, make sure that's doing what we want. So yeah, we've got that spinning thing, and it's painting the wall over there. If we wanted, we could maybe change the intensity a little bit. So we could change the intensity on both of these lights, and we'll set instead of 5.5, let's go 6.5, and we'll change our range to a nice, say, even number 18. We'll try this again and see how it looks throughout the whole room. It's a little brighter on this wall, and I think that's pretty good. I think that's something like what we want. I think that looks pretty good. It looks good on the car, all over the place there. I don't have a collider on this car, that's not a huge deal. So anyway, there's the scene so far, but we still need our sound. So I'm going to, on the siren, attach our sound. But actually, before I do that, I should have done this a bit ago. Make a folder for our scripts, because otherwise we're going to wind up looking for our stuff and having to type the name in to find it, and that's just not what we want. So I'm going to go back out here, get my sound, bring it into Unity, custom assets, new folder again, keep everything nice and tidy, that's really important. Take it out of scripts, and what did I do with my sound? Excuse me. So now in our sounds folder, our police siren loopable. I'll be honest, it's not that great of a loop, but I get it for free, and you know, what can you do? And we're just going to attach it to our siren object. And we won't need to do anything in our script, because I'm just going to assume that for as long as this siren is going, we're going to want it to make sound. So there's no point doing anything in a script. We can affect this in the way that we want, all just in the inspector. So we've got our police siren here. It's going to play as soon as it's in the scene, and we're going to want it to loop so that it plays continuously. And so now when we do this, we should have our sound as well. So there you go. Nice 3D sound. It's got a nice effect, and there's your police light and siren. So that's how you make that. And I'm just going to show you really quickly how to turn this into a prefab in case you don't know. First, I'm going to create another folder for prefabs. And then I'm going to take my siren and I'm just going to drag it drop it in prefabs. So you can see here this turned blue, and that just means that it's a prefab. And all a prefab is a set of objects and components that is prefabricated. It's something that's already made, and to use it, all you've got to do is drag it from your project view into your scene, wherever you want to go, and it's got the script, it's got the lights, it's got everything that we just made already attached to it. So you can attach this to any other vehicle or whatever you want to do with it, and it'll work just like the other one does. And so I'm just going to set this up in the other corner, and we'll see what it would look like to have two vehicles. Actually, you know what, just for sake of realism or whatever, I'm just going to duplicate this police car and move it over here. And we'll see what this scene looks like now. So you see that effect in the corner, you get kind of that flashing effect, reminds you of maybe some kind of cop shows or whatever that you watch. And so this looks pretty good in this little kind of room that you would never see police cars in. So you can just imagine on a street with some houses or buildings around that it would look pretty good. We've got the 3D sound on this one, and we've got 3D sound on this one. And there you have it. There's the scene with the police cars, with the lights, with the sound, and I think it looks pretty good for being completely free. The assets were free, the code was free, everything's free. I showed you how to make the lights, how to make the sound, how to make them spin, how to make that cop car for free, and how to turn the siren into a prefab. And actually, if you want, you can drag the whole police car in here. And the police car is now a prefab. You just drag and drop, and you get, you know, a bajillion police cars wherever you want them. And it's simple as that. And you got all kinds of police cars. Made the one, and they're all good to go. So if you like this video, check back every once in a while, because I'm going to have more every now and then. And I think the next one I'm going to do is Spotlight that's going to follow your character, or whatever it is that you want it to follow. So it could be something like if you played the original Metal Gear Solid game for PS1, where you step into a spotlight and they follow you, and it's during a stealth game. So I think that's the next one that I'm going to do. Hopefully you like the video and you come back to check out some more. If you have something that you want to see made, let me know, and I'll see if I know how to do it, or if I can figure out how to do it and make a video for you. So yeah, see you around.